This is a 2013 Toyota Hilux 3-liter D4D. But this is not just any Toyota Hilux D4D. This is my dad's Toyota Hilux D4D that he bought all the way back in 2013 when I was still in primary school. In this video, I'm gonna take it out for a drive, review it, explain why this specific buggy is so special to me and so significant in my life. And then we're gonna take it back home and give it a wash because as you can see, we are out here in the Bundus. So it did get quite a bit dirty. Right, then let's start by taking it out on the road. Starting off the driving review with how this thing feels on the road. And I think the most accurate way to describe this, or the only way to describe this, is imagine what would it feel like to drive a Sherman tank. That is exactly how this thing feels like on the road, just as rough as possible. It's honestly kind of surprising how rough and bumpy this thing is on the road, considering how not so old it is. This is only a 11-12-year-old buggy, and it feels like I'm driving a 2003 Hilux. Now this simply comes down to this thing just being a fundamental buggy. At the back we have leaf springs. The fronts are coils, but they don't really do much either. It is built to work. It is built to have a load at the back of it. So when it's empty like this, the back does tend to be a bit bumpier, a bit more jolly, because there's nothing weighing it down and pressing it to the floor. So yeah, it performs like you would expect the most traditional buggy to perform, in that it is very fundamental in how it drives. Driving this thing, you feel like you're driving a buggy. It does not feel like a car in the slightest bit. In terms of comfort, it is not bad. You could enjoy a long road trip with it, but if you're used to higher end cars that are more luxurious, that could be a challenge. But it's not really that bad in the comfort department. It's just that it does feel like a bit of a buggy, a bit of a tank, in that it is really rigid on the road and doesn't really like handling that much. I mean, yeah, that is to be expected. It's not really a BMW, but it doesn't like taking corners at speed. It doesn't like speed at all, actually. I found that the best speed to cruise with at this thing is like 100 kilometers an hour. That seems to be where this thing feels the most comfortable. That seems to be where this thing does not get pushed. Top speed that I normally go if I'm in a rush is 140 kilometers an hour. Anything over that is really just overkill. At that point, you're really just abusing this thing, because it will tell you, you will know that this thing does not want to go over 140 kilometers an hour. It starts shaking everywhere. Oh, some cows here. So yeah, starts being really jumpy and bumpy on the road. Can feel that it's really not comfortable with the speed you're trying to make it go. And yeah, I feel like it does deliver on that traditional buggy driving experience. And in terms of power for overtaking, for normal traffic, this thing is fine for overtaking. It has enough grunt to get you past a truck in a reasonably quick manner. I mean, quick and Hilux are words that never go in a sentence together unless we're talking about like the Dakar version, but it does have a bit of get up and go. I wouldn't say it's a total slouch, but you can tell that this thing is definitely not a speed demon at all. It is just a cruiser and something that feels more at home off the road than it does on it. So yeah, when you compare it to newer buggies that really just feel like cars inside, when you're driving new buggies, maybe take for instance the new Isuzu D-Max, or take for instance the new Ford Ranger, the steering is so light and the pedals are so, like, everything is so car-like that you honestly start forgetting, except for how big they are, because they are quite massive. Apart from their size, you kind of forget that you're driving a buggy when you're driving those types of buggies. They're really comfortable inside, really quiet. This is not. This makes you feel like you're driving a buggy, makes you feel like you're driving something utilitarian, something that just gets you from point A to point B in the most bulletproof manner possible. It's not really built for being a city crawler or a mall crawler. It's built to be something where you drive between farms, where you drive between plants, where you drive inside a mine and stuff like that. That really is the essence of this car. That really is the feeling that you get from driving this car. It's just rugged reliability, just really emphasizing minimalism and simplicity in how it drives. It is a really simplistic, really reliable mode of transportation for people like my family, for instance, who live in rural areas, who more often than not are using unpaved roads, for people who work in mines, stuff like that. It really does have that Toyota bulletproofness and that Toyota build quality. I mean, for a 12-year-old car, this interior has held together exceptionally well. And yes, that does also have to do with the fact that my dad takes exceptional good care of his cars. He never neglects his cars whatsoever. All of his cars are always meticulously maintained. But apart from that, another factor is just how rugged this thing is. Even if you were someone who really didn't take that good care of your cars, this thing still feels bulletproof. This thing still feels like it's something that's going to withstand the test of time. Now, this bakkie in particular is really special to me because this is the bakkie that built my life. My dad bought this bakkie in 2013 when I was in grade 2. I learned how to drive in this bakkie a year later, actually, when I was in grade 3, when I was 9 years old. He taught me how to drive in this exact bakkie. And fast forward a few years, I was in matric, and this was the bakkie I was driving every single day to school because my scholar transport at that point was really inefficient for me because I lived really far away from school. So my scholar transport would take a really long time to get me to school, and I saw that as really just an inefficient way to work. So I decided that, you know what, it's better that I use some of my side hustling income to pour diesel into this bakkie so that I use it as my mode of transportation. And it never let me down, not once. Every single morning that I would start this thing up, it would start up, first kick, get me to school and get me back, day in, day out, for the entire year of 2023. And it's one of the reasons why I was able to obtain 7 distinctions in my grade 12. It's because of just how reliable this thing is, just how bulletproof this thing is. And I think that's why I have such a soft spot for Toyota vehicles. It's because of what this bakkie has done for me personally. Now, driving this thing off-road, it just feels completely at home. There is no bakkie that feels more at home off-road than this thing right here. Now, this particular model, my dad's model, is a 2-wheel drive with an automatic gearbox. He did have a 4x4 manual before this, but then this was his retirement bakkie, so he just switched over to automatic just to make things a lot easier for him. But nonetheless, despite the automatic gearbox, it still is an absolute beast offline. There's nothing that drives like this thing off the road. I think adventure as far as to say this bakkie feels more at home off-road than on the road. If it's not loaded at the back and you're driving on the road, it does have a tendency to just bounce around and generally not be the most stable thing ever, you know, compared to newer bakkies with coil spring at the back and the front. It does have a tendency to drive like a lorry. On off-road, you don't notice that because of how solid this thing feels. It feels rigid. It feels like you're gonna get to where you want to go. I think that's the reason why the police force in South Africa use these things, because no road can stand in this thing's way. It will go anywhere and get there in one piece, unlike a Ranger where it hits a porthole and explodes into a million different pieces, and now you need to buy a new engine, and now your shocks are ruined, and now your steering doesn't work and stuff like that. This takes relentless abuse without stopping. It is honestly such a beast of a vehicle, which, if we're being honest, is part of the reason why it is so stolen. This thing can cross any river that you throw at it. You know, say like a river to like Mozambique or something like that. This is an absolutely bulletproof engine, and I can see why it would be so targeted. That and the fact that Toyota's security systems are really lackluster. I think that's also a problem that also causes these things to be really targeted. It's just the security system on this car is non-existent. It is so easy to steal compared to other bakkies. But yeah, that's another story, another conversation for another day. That was the off-road review of the 2013 Toyota Hilux. So as we know, Toyota Hiluxes are amongst one of the most stolen vehicles in South Africa, especially this model of Toyota Hilux in particular. And the reason for that is what is under that bonnet. The 3-litre D40 engine that is probably the most durable thing that mankind has ever produced. I mean, this engine will probably outlive this car's entire body with how durable it is. This is really a marvel of engineering, and as such, it is very desired amongst our hungry African brothers. Now, back in 2013, back in the day, if you will, when my father bought this bakkie, our African brothers were not so hungry, so they weren't that desired, they weren't getting that stolen. But then as time went on, you know, crime started to go up and these bakkies were the main suspect. If I took this bakkie to Jozi today, I probably would not come back with it. That's how bad it is. You cannot leave this type of Hilux outside of a Pick and Pay and expect to find it when you come back. It's simply not possible in the economy that we are in now. Now then, how does that affect how I view this bakkie? Well, it doesn't affect my viewpoint of this bakkie at all. Where I live here in Mpumalanga, deep in the Pundus, I don't even want to specify where I live because I don't trust anything on the internet. People might find me and actually hijack it as I'm trying to make a point about how safe it is here. But where I live, this area that I live in is relatively safe compared to the higher crime areas, maybe in your Gauteng and Eastern Cape and stuff like that. So these are not a huge risk. They're not a huge risk, but there's still a risk. We do try and just avoid taking trips with this car. We either take the I-10 or we take my Beamer, because anywhere outside of our little community, these things are still high priority, high crime risk. Preferably the first thing I would buy before buying this thing is a gun. I'd probably get a Glock first. After a Glock, I'd probably go to church, make sure that my spirituality is aligned properly, make sure that I am in God's good books, and then I would go ahead and buy this thing. You need to be armed and prayed up in order to drive this thing anywhere. But if you have your gun, you have your prayer, you have God by your side, then you shouldn't have a problem. I mean, you will have a problem, but with God and a gun by your side, I'm pretty sure you know how you're gonna sort that problem out. In terms of it as a car, I would really recommend it. It is the most reliable car ever. I think I will venture as far as to say this is the most reliable car ever, because Top Gear has proven that Hiluxes are kind of bulletproof. But it is the most reliable bakkie ever. You buy this bakkie once, you'll never buy a bakkie ever again in your life, and your children's life, and their children's life, and their children's life, probably. It is a multi-generational bakkie that will stay in the bloodline, stay running forever. But if we look at the facts of it, if you buy this bakkie and you live in a high crime area, you live in your Gauteng and all those other places where hijacking is a real problem, you're just putting yourself at risk. It would be really dumb to buy this bakkie if you live in those types of areas. You're just putting yourself and your family's lives at risk with buying it. It's a really good bakkie, there are no complaints. It's probably the best bakkie ever made, but once again, due to the nature of things right now, politics and stuff like that, the crime rate with these bakkies is just ridiculous. I couldn't find a way to justify buying it unless you maybe install something like a ghost in it, an immobilizer, maybe that will work. But once again, that doesn't negate the fact that you might get hijacked at gunpoint, you know. So yeah, that is the review of my dad's 2013 Toyota Hilux. The best bakkie ever, but also the worst bakkie ever, in that you won't last 12 months owning it without it being deported to Mozambique at some point. Yeah, thank you for watching.